There we go. So hello to anyone who's watching this back, as well as those who are here. Today's session is called Building a Case for Support, and it's really all about showing funders, investors, customers and supporters, not just what you do, but why it matters and getting some buy-in as well. So both Catalyst Miami and Miami Homes for All are working at the intersection of some urgent challenges in Miami, from things like housing instability to generational poverty. So today's workshop is really planned and designed to help you build on the powerful stories that you already have and stories that you already share, but actually tailoring them to resonate with specific audiences, so with key partners, funders, and community members. So today we're learning to communicate that value better, more effectively, in a way that really resonates with them. We know, obviously, that every bit of the work that you do really matters, but sometimes the right people don't see the impact clearly, and sometimes that can be a really big challenge in getting additional funding and support. So that's where having a strong case for support really comes in, and that's what we're going to unpack today. So hopefully the session is going to help you to tell your organisation's story more strategically, to help unlock future funding and grow your impact as well. So we'll just look through our agenda. So we'll be looking at building your case and discussing things about what makes a strong case and an example structure that you can use. And then we'll look at applying and tailoring your case to different channels and audiences, so where that might fit differently for different people, for different formats. And then we'll look at some examples as well. And then we have got like a reflection activity where you can work to apply this to your organisation, and we can also chat that through and share together as well. And then, of course, have time for questions and next steps before the end. So just looking at our learning outcomes, we want to hopefully make sure that everyone can understand the core components of a strong case for support. So identify and explain the key elements that make a case for support compelling, including a mission clarity, evidence of impact, and a clear call to action. Hey, Daniela, thanks so much for joining us. I see you've just dialed in. I was just quickly introducing the topic, so perfect timing. We're just talking through today about creating a case for support, so engaging with your different audiences in a really compelling way. So just looking at the learning outcomes, as well as understanding the components of a really strong and effective case for support, we also want to help you apply storytelling frameworks to inspire action. So learn to apply proven storytelling techniques to the content that you already have, and being able to adjust that in ways that will really resonate with people. And on that as well, we're looking at tailoring messaging for your diverse stakeholders. So adapting that pitch that you will be able to develop to those different stakeholder groups, whether that's funders, partners, or community members, by really aligning messaging with what they value, what they need, and things that align with their motivations and their priorities as well. So as we get started, I know there's just a couple of us, but I will launch a poll anyway. Just looking at whether you currently have a case for support, and that might be some kind of like formal document, it might be certain like an organisation story or whatever that looks like, and how confident you currently feel about creating one. Thank you for your votes. Yeah, I think it looks like those of you on the call don't yet have a case for support, which means we're in the right place, talking about the right thing, and hopefully we'll be able to really help you with that today, and that you'll leave today with some kind of frameworks and techniques that you can use to actually do that. Thank you. And actually, as we think of that, we've got an icebreaker kind of activity just to help get us all thinking along the right lines. I find it quite a helpful exercise, actually. So it's all about getting to the root of the work that you do. So we've got a couple of questions here on screen now. And yeah, take a moment to pause and reflect, and either come off of mute and share, or put it in the chat, whichever you feel most comfortable doing. The first one is, what is your organization's superpower? So really thinking like, what are you good at as an organization? What makes you unique? What makes you stand out? So have a think about what could be your organization's superpower. And the second thing is, what is one thing that you have helped to grow? So this could be a community project. Perhaps you've got a really successful program that didn't exist before, something new that you started amongst your volunteers, service users. So two questions there. First one, thinking, what is your organization's superpower? And also something that you have helped to grow. So I'll give everyone a moment just to think about that, have a read through, and then feel free to share your answers whenever you're ready. And then that will be hopefully very relevant in terms of the next things we'll be doing. So just to start sparking some ideas about how you might be telling your organization's story. Yeah, does anyone have any thoughts on the first one, on what might be your superpower or your organization's superpower rather than your own? We recently did a similar activity with a different cohort of organizations who are in totally different kind of area of work, but lots of them were talking about what kind of made them stand out either as businesses or as charities in their communities, which was really interesting. Taylor, thanks for your message. So you're saying your organization superpower, meeting immediate needs while collectively building a better future. Love that. That's a really nice, succinct way of saying that, which is really, really cool. And I like, yeah, it sounds like what you then do that you can use to set apart from other organizations, or if you are pitching your organization, is then showing that you're doing both of those things. So you're kind of addressing the systemic issues in building towards a better future, but also practically, tangibly helping people here and now, which is really cool. And then one thing that you've helped to grow is an ecosystem of climate action and cooperative economies, which is amazing. So hopefully that already helps to start thinking about how you might be kind of articulating who you are, what you do, and the difference that you've already made as well. But feel free to share any more that anyone thinks of. But hopefully that's just started getting the brains whirring as we go into thinking about case for support. So I'll hand over to Simran now, but if anyone wants to kind of continue with any of that exercise, I'll also be checking the chat too. So over to you, Simran.
Thank you, Jasmine. So yeah, let's start by breaking down what a case for support actually is. So a case for support is a clear, compelling, and audience-tailored document that answers one essential question, and that is, why should someone invest in or partner with your work? So for organizations like Catalyst Miami and Miami Homes for All, working at the intersection of housing justice, economic mobility, and racial equity, a strong case for support is your opportunity to explain the following. So the first could be the urgent systemic challenges your communities are facing, whether that's a lack of affordable housing, deepening wealth gaps, or barriers to civic participation. And then secondly, it's about why your organization is uniquely positioned to address these challenges. So that may be through community-led solutions, through policy, advocacy, or perhaps direct support. It's also important to clarify what a case for support is not. So it's not a grant application, though you might draw from it to strengthen one. And it's also not just a pitch deck or a quick elevator speech. It goes a lot deeper than that. And we want you to think of it as your core narrative. So it's a foundational tool that you can adapt for proposals, websites, funder meetings, community outreach, policy briefings, newsletters, and even social media. So it basically tells your story in a way that builds connection, trust, and urgency. So once you've actually built a strong case for support, it then becomes a tool that you could then repurpose and adapt wherever you need to tell your story persuasively. So if you look on your slides now, you can see that it can take a lot of formats. So it could become in the form of a one-pager, a slide deck, a multiple page PDF or a Word doc, or a web page. So anything that may come offhand in a certain situation where you kind of need to refer a donor or a funder to a certain source of information. So why is having a strong case for support so essential? It's because funders, partners, and community allies don't just invest in projects, but they also invest in people, especially people with a clear, urgent, and meaningful purpose. Your case for support is how you show them the transformation that you're driving, and it also helps you rise above the noise. The reality is that the funders and decision makers that you may be trying to catch the attention of receive countless proposals, pitches, and emails every week. So what actually makes you stand out? And that actually comes down to four things. So the first is clarity. So it's important to be crystal clear about the problem that you're addressing and also what you're asking for. Funders need to immediately understand what the issue is, why does it matter, especially in your community, and also what do you need from them. If they'll have to dig to kind of figure that out, they're likely to move on. Secondly is urgency. So you need to explain why this matters right now. What's at risk if we don't act? For example, will more families be priced out of their neighborhoods, or will this also continue to widen racial wealth gaps? Funders want to know that by supporting you, they're actually acting on something that can't wait and needs action now. Third, we have impact. So it's not enough to say that you're doing good work. You also need to show it. And that might look like showing fewer evictions, increased civic engagement, also maybe families moving from temporary shelters to permanent housing. It could also come in the form of demonstrating policy wins that shift local housing practices. It's important to back it all up with stories, outcomes, and numbers, something that paints a picture of the difference that you're trying to make. Fourth, we have your potential to scale. So funders are always thinking about the future and they're asking, if this works, what's next? So here are some questions you can consider when putting together your case for support. And that is, can this model grow across neighborhoods? Could it shift policy at the city or county level? And also, could it inspire other cities facing similar crises? Even if you're a small team, showing a vision for broader impact through partnerships or community-led replication or advocacy can go a really long way. And at the heart of all of this, you need to remember that you're not just offering data, but you're also offering a story of transformation. Your stakeholders, whether that's funders, collaborators, or residents, they want stories that are rooted in real challenges and also real solutions. So, in spaces like housing and poverty, where systemic issues can feel overwhelming, your narrative should highlight not just the urgency, but also the hope and the resilience and also the change that you're already helping to create. So for example, let's take a look at the slide where we have two statements. So we have one statement which says, we work on economic and housing justice in Miami, and it's quite generic and abstract. And what we're asking for you is to kind of be more story driven and human focused. So if we were to change this into a strong case for support, we'd change it to maybe Anna, a single mother in Little Havana, used our support to build her credit, secure stable housing, and now leads a local advocacy group fighting for renters' rights. Which one, if you guys could let me know, do you think will resonate more with the reader, the first or the second? And I could also see Daniela has shared her superpower, which is convening stakeholders to build collective power that drives various housing solutions and informing through research about the gaps and opportunities for better housing practices. That's actually really well put. And I feel like that also shows kind of the person or the funder or donor kind of where they could then go on to look for your impact. So that's actually already quite a powerful what do you call it, superpower and way of wording it. Thank you for sharing. Um, I guess this is an obvious question, but we could all collectively agree that the best statement out of the two is obviously the second one, purely because it will resonate more and is more human focused and story driven. So we do ask, maybe think about the stories behind the sentences or statements that you do provide. To help structure your case for support, we're going to ground it in a narrative that's simple, relatable, and powerful, and that is building a house. This is because stories stick when they're clear and linear, and whether your audience is a funder, a policymaker, or a potential partner, they're much more likely to connect with your work when they can follow a story from the foundation to the finished result. So I'm now going to break this journey down into 4 parts that you can build your case around. And it will be just like constructing a solid, livable home. So first we have our foundation, and that is your mission. So this is where you start. So you start by laying the foundation, and this is the why behind everything you do. So why does your organization exist? What kind of future are you helping to build for Miami? And also, what do you stand for? It's essentially your chance to connect emotionally with your audience, and you could back it up with local stats to show the scale of the issue. For example, a statement or a stat you could say, use and include is over half of Miami households are cost burdened by rent, and many are one crisis away from eviction. And as you can see, stats like this can make people stop. They reveal the cracks in the current system and make your mission urgent and necessary. And then after that, we have your blueprint, and that is the challenge. So it's the specific challenge that you're addressing as an organization. So maybe it's the lack of affordable housing stock, a broken social safety net, or even racial wealth gaps across generations. Whatever it is, name it clearly and explain why it matters now. Funders and stakeholders need to understand the stakes. What's happening in this moment that makes action urgent? And what risks do families face if nothing happens or nothing changes right now? So, this is where you help your audience picture the structural problems that you're working to fix. And that's before you actually show them how. And that's where we get to our construction, which is your response. So this is all about showing what you're doing to build a better system. And this, in your context, can include community-led housing solutions, policy advocacy and tenant protections, economic mobility programs, leadership pipelines, and civic engagement work. Whatever it is, please do try keep your language clear and jargon-free. You don't need to list every service, just focus on what's unique about your approach. So exactly, Daniela, how you mentioned your superpower, and Taylor, focus on that one thing that makes you stand out. And also think about how it's led by those most impacted and how it fits the current moment. Help people really visualize the work. So who are you working with? What does progress look like? And what does it look like on the ground and level at which you are functioning? And then lastly, we have home, and this is where you think about your impact, the ask, and your vision. So you're bringing them essentially into the finished room, and showing them the answer to this question, which is what's changed because of your work. And so this is where you show your impact, and it's also where numbers help, but also so do stories. So maybe think about, for instance, an example story could be this year, 40 families avoided eviction through our housing clinic. Or even maybe you combine the two of storytelling and data by maybe the following sentence, which says, one resident advocate helped secure 1.5 million in community investment. So show the story and show the vision and the impact. Mix in your quotes, photos, and testimonials, anything that brings the human story to life, and then be bold and clear with your ask. So, what do you really need to keep building? Is it funding? Are you asking for strategic partners? Maybe it's research collaborators, or maybe even media attention. So, be really focused and clear with what you're really asking for and break it down. And then, after you've done that, you want to end with a strong vision. So if you get the support that you're asking for, what future is it that you can build together? And remind your audience that this isn't just about need, it's about opportunity, because we all know that's what funders and donors are looking for. You're not just repairing what's broken, but you're also designing what's possible. So on your screen, you can now see a sample adapted to Catalyst Miami. And something also that needs to be mentioned is to make sure that you do tailor your case for support by audience. So think about what really moves a funder, and that is also different from what will move a donor or an investor or a corporate partner. So this slide will be available for you to download and to see on Lightful Academy if you need to go back to this. So some good news is that you don't need to start from scratch when building your case for support. In fact, most of you already have a goldmine of content and evidence sitting within your organization right now, and that is and could come in the form of project reports, baseline surveys, testimonials, updates, and stories from volunteers and staff. And all of this is valuable, and all you need to do is just repackage it and repurpose it into a story format. So start with what you already have and what you know works with your audiences. I might actually go back and talk through the slide with that's adapted to Catalyst Miami. I felt like I jumped through that. So here we have our foundation, as we mentioned, and that is, as you could say, it could be building community-led solutions for economic justice. And then we go on to the blueprint. So we're showing them, how we're getting to what we're kind of the vision that we're showing. And that is over half of Miami-Dade families live in liquid asset poverty. That's the challenge of what you're facing and trying to overcome. And then you have your construction, which is your response. So this is for Catalyst Miami, prosperity services, advocacy training, future-bound savings accounts. And then you also then move on to focus on your impact. And in this case, it could be thousands have gained stability, savings, and leadership skills. That's always a really helpful format and framework to come back to when building your case for support. But definitely when doing this and trying to demonstrate or putting it together in a one-pager or a PDF, leverage your existing content because you already have it and all you need to do is repackage it and repurpose it into story format. So let's move on and look at some examples of how you could repurpose and repackage what you already have. So for example, you could use before and after visuals of anything physical that you're working with. And photos can really bring stories to life. So perhaps it's showing what a community center looks like now versus before there was an investment in one of your programs. Secondly, you could also try and extract quotes and human stories from the people you work with. So it could be community members, people who benefit from your services, or even volunteer and staff member stories, because they can also give a different perspective and view of your work as well. And even actually, a one-line quote can be really powerful in making your impact feel personal and real. And then also you could take your data and turn it into simple headline friendly stats. So perhaps instead of leaving it buried in a long report, try and pull out your clear numbers. So for instance, you could say 82% loan repayment rate or 27% increase in housing security. Try to speak in that same language in which the funder and donor will be approaching your work with. And that's because these small, clear data points speak volumes, and they're exactly what your funders and partners look for when assessing your impact. So remember, you probably do have 80% of the materials you do need already. The task now is just about shaping it into a clear, engaging, human-centered story that really connects the dots. And I'm now going to pass it over to Jasmine, who will share some examples.
Great, thanks, Simran. So we're going to look at, firstly, an example of an organisation that really brings that all to life, I think, really effectively. And this is from Habitat for Humanity, which offers a really strong example for other housing nonprofits when it comes to crafting and sharing an effective case for support. So I'll have a scroll through, actually. I've got it open on my browser, so let's have a look. So this is on their website, and this is under their case for support on their website page. So you can see you've got like kind of that initial headline, perhaps their kind of superpower. And they've got, it's really visual. I think they've got loads of data in here, but they make it really visually engaging. So you've got a big statement at the top saying since 1976, Habitat for Humanity has helped more than 46 million people build homes, communities, and hope. And then we scroll down because it then goes to talk about what the problem is. So that challenge, so the problem is vast. And then we've got some stats. And what I like is they've pulled out in bold those big numbers. So actually initially I was like, oh, there's a few things to read, but actually just from skimming, I can see that there's big impact around the world in the US, and I can see some survey insights and links to kind of reputable sources as well. And if I keep scrolling, we've got a bit more info. So it's kind of telling the story in just individual sentences rather than saying like, here's a massive paragraph all about the challenge. So we're saying, and it's very moving as well. So we're saying many parents are forced to make impossible choices about food, healthcare, and education. And the visuals are really nice too, because it kind of keeps moving and keeps you engaged. This is as I'm scrolling, by the way, that these kind of boxes are moving. And it brings it home as well of being quite down to earth and saying like how this affects people day to day. So talking about problems of poor living conditions and disrepair. But as we keep scrolling, it says, got a few more statements and basically outlining the challenge. But then we've got a really, it's very, very obvious. So then saying Habitat is uniquely suited to address the problem. So they've literally gone into the detail of the problem, and then they've not shied away from saying, we've got the solution, which I think is really, really interesting. And then we've got the background to the organisation, and then they've matched, I think, a lot of these to the challenges they've mentioned. So they've said the challenges, and then they're saying some statements about what the work is that they do. And again, it's keeping it brief. Like Simran said, you kind of don't want to go into list out every single thing they do, because that would be too lengthy, but actually just giving you a picture of it. And then these visuals that are suddenly a lot more bright and cheerful. They've got real people. We go down to see the results. We've got some case studies that people can click through, but we've also got one pull-out story here as well, which if you haven't clicked through to any videos, you still get to see. And it talks more about how this is happening through volunteers. You've got quotes as well. And it's quite long, but I think what they've done really nicely is they've made it very visually engaging. So it's a really lovely design that means that, you know, when I was looking at this before, I just keep scrolling because there's more interesting information, and then it gets more and more detailed the further you go down. But the point being, the kind of top bit that you scroll through has really outlined what they do, the challenge, how they've got a solution, and kind of how they want to work with people. And then you can go down to have like the call to action and what they actually want to do and want from their contacts as well. So I think it's really interesting how much that stands out, as it's obviously community-based, sustainable, and really focused on empowerment and long-term stability. But they talk about that they don't just build homes, they build strength, self-reliance, and community ownership. So I think that would be what they would probably say in answer to that question earlier about what would their superpower be. One of the key features they mention is about having their approach of sweat equity, which is future homeowners help to build their homes, and it reduces the costs, also gives new skills as well. And then it talks about their loans and how it's self-sustaining as well. So I think it's really interesting how much they can outline all of that in their page. And obviously that web page is designed to be a specific kind of case for support, looking at partnering or funding, and that I guess is kind of packaged ready to share with people. But you might then still want to tailor it to different audiences depending on who you're talking to, because actually that would be far too lengthy for somebody like an individual donor, but it would be really great as part of a pitch if you're saying, look, here's a little bit about us, we'd love to look at some kind of partnerships later down the line. So I think this is a really lovely example, but it is more in that kind of thorough, in-depth approach, perhaps how like a PDF or a one-pager might look if you're looking to pull something together for funders. So I really like that example. I think then we can think more about how you would actually tailor your case for support to help you reach the right audiences. And it's really about thinking about what message they want to see and what's actually going to encourage them to take action. And it's really similar, I think, to when we talked before about target audiences and personas. It's thinking like what motivates them, what do they care about? But it's thinking about those different audiences. So once you've got, you might have a core case for support, and it might look a bit like the Habitat one. It might be a shorter version. I definitely don't think it needs to be that long. Sometimes it is just by nature of how much you want to kind of put in it. But I think you start off with a core one, and then have that ready to then adapt to different people depending on who you're speaking to. And this is really key for your organizations when you're working across complex systems. So when you're working with housing, economic resilience, racial equity, you're probably speaking to very different types of stakeholders depending on the conversations that you're having. So this slide just shows how tailoring your message can help reach the right people with the right story in a way that then inspires them to act. So we'll just walk through a few of those audiences that you might be interacting with. So we've got institutional funders, so this might be foundations, governments, large NGOs, groups like Knight Foundation, local government, national funders perhaps. And they really want to see how your work fits into their strategic goals. So, for example, that might be related to reducing racial wealth gaps, advancing economic mobility, increasing housing affordability. So they care about systems change, scalability, and whether your model is backed by data. So when you're tailoring your case for this particular group, it's maybe thinking about using a more formal analytical tone, sharing your theory of change, any metrics, any evaluation methods, and aligning your language to their language as well, and really thinking about what their goals are and how you can then weave that into what you're saying too. So, for example, you could have a line in there that says, this initiative aligns with Miami-Dade County's 10-year housing strategy and addresses root causes of economic insecurity among BIPOC communities. And so it's thinking, what do they care about and how are we answering that? And then next, we've got corporate partners. So you might have a range of them, really. You might have banks, employers, corporate social responsibility teams, developers, lots of different organisations. So you'll know them best, and I think you'll be able to tailor those accordingly. But it might include things like employers looking to invest in economic mobility for their workforce, or there might be banks interested in financial literacy partnerships, whatever that looks like. These partners often look for shared value. So how does this partnership kind of reflect well on them and their brand, but also do something meaningful? So they'll be interested in things like brand alignment. So if they've got DEI goals, they might have environmental social governance targets, so aligning with what they're passionate about. It might be innovation as well. I think they're often looking for innovative kind of growing ideas that they can be a part of, but also visibility. You know, if it's a corporate partner, they probably want to be involved in some kind of events, co-branding, and perhaps some online content as well. So again, you can tailor your message and highlighting the partnership potential. So things like, by supporting this program, your company helps to build a more resilient, financially secure workforce in Miami. You can be specific about recognition or return on investment. So even saying things like, your support will be featured in our quarterly impact reports and donor spotlights. You know, sometimes that feels maybe a little bit strange to be saying, but I think sometimes being really transparent about that can be helpful, particularly when you kind of picture it a bit like sponsorship. And then moving on to community stakeholders. So these are going to be different to those other stakeholders. These might be program participants, volunteers, youth leaders, grassroots partners. So for both of your organisations, the community is not just a beneficiary and receiver, it's a driver of change. So trust and local relevance are so important. And then you're probably used to doing this in the way that you communicate anyway, but when speaking to these community audiences, we're thinking about using accessible, practical language, showing how community members are involved in designing and delivering the work, and emphasising real local outcomes. Again, another example, we train and fund worker-owned businesses led by residents of Liberty City, or last year, our youth coalition helped shape housing policy at the city level. So personal stories, trusted voices, things from like alumni, peer leaders can go a long way here. So that will be different, and you can use that core case for support and then adapt it depending on what it is you're wanting to share. But it can be really helpful as well to empower and equip people with the right kind of messaging and language to actually be able to articulate what it is that you do. Because I know that can be challenging sometimes, of thinking of that like everyday language people can use. And then individual donors. So these might be major donors, local supporters, bigger philanthropists as well. This is a group that obviously often connects more emotionally to a cause, and they want to feel that their support is meaningful, but on kind of quite a personal level, I think. And that's where they differ from those kind of bigger funders and partners, because it's actually a kind of one-to-one relationship. So tailoring your messaging, you can start with more of an emotive story, something that captures emotion, impact, and break down what their gift can make possible. So in those smaller numbers, so maybe it's $250 helps a family build their credit and secure a safe home. Talk about how you'll keep them engaged. So whether that's through thank you notes, newsletters, invitations to events, keeping that personal relationship. And you can say things like, your support helps young people move from housing insecurity to becoming leaders in their community. So something that can make them feel really involved on a personal level. And then finally, large institutions. So this might be regional housing funds, major development banks. Approaching big systems level players, you need to show through your case that you have policy alignment, whether that's local, state, federal, scalability and sustainability, and also strong financial models. So kind of bigger, a lot more formal than that previous audience, because quite a different type of reader is going to be looking through this. So you've got another example message, and it says, this pilot supports Miami-Dade's resilience goals and builds on the groundwork laid by our 80-member housing coalition. We're seeking co-investment to scale the model to additional districts. So really spelling it out, really, really clear. And you can use structured formats like frameworks. You might have a theory of change, any return on investment estimates, and evidence of prior funding, successful pilots, previous programs that have had similar levels of impact. But actually for both of your organisations, the really good news is that you already have strong values-driven stories. And actually, like Simran was saying, it's really a case of tailoring those and tweaking them, and packaging them up in the right way to reach the right audience. So it's kind of getting the right angle, whether that's the emotional, practical, financial, strategic, and really meeting people where they are and thinking about what it is they want to see from you. So we've got some example adaptations of how we might adapt the same core message for different audiences to hopefully help bring that to life and actually show how you can have a core story. And then it's not, okay, we need to make a brand new one for every single audience, but just tweaking that. So the original message we've got on screen is, we support Miami residents to overcome systemic barriers to housing and economic stability. So if we're speaking to a foundation, we might reframe it like this. We address Miami's housing and financial insecurity through community-led, equity-driven programs, from savings accounts for kids to policy change that reduces homelessness. So this version focuses on impact, resilience, and measurable results, so all things that foundations care about. And then for a corporate partner, the emphasis shifts to shared values and business outcomes. So partnering with us helps build a more resilient Miami workforce by expanding access to stable housing, financial health, and local entrepreneurship. And then finally, when we speak to the public, to individual donors, this message becomes a bit more emotional, a bit more personal. So your support helps Miami families like Anna's find safe homes, build credit, and lead change in their communities, turning struggle to strength. So here the focus is on a real person's story, but in just a few words, you kind of really brought to life the tangible difference that that support can make. And I think the reader can then straight away picture actually what that's doing practically. There's just examples. Of course, you will actually know your audiences a lot more in depth, and you can, I would recommend as well, using the personas you've created to help with this too. Taylor, thanks for your comments. I'm glad it's helpful. And yeah, it's kind of thinking about demonstrating work, but not needing to do kind of loads and loads of depth and loads of words, which is often what we end up doing, I think, but kind of how can we summarize that on a level that gets people then interested, and actually they have already got a picture in their head of what it is that you do, and then you can kind of go deeper and have these conversations. So with all of that talking, we've got an activity to hopefully bring this to life. So we're going to reflect on how you would pitch your organisation to a key stakeholder. So whether that's a funder, investor, customer, partner, you can choose, and we've got some questions. So a bit like an elevator pitch, that kind of short, compelling introduction that explains who you are, what you do, and why it matters. So sharing your own problem and solution statement. So what challenge are you addressing, and how does your work make a difference? And then finally thinking of like a one-liner for your value proposition. So that's like a short, clear sentence that captures why your organisation matters and the change that you're trying to create. So it's probably quite a lot of thinking to do. So I might give you some time just to have some solo reflection based on what we've just talked about. And then it'll be really cool if either of you would be up for sharing, not the level of like the Habitat page, but almost like a paragraph or a few sentences that just summarise that. But if you want me to pull up any of the other slides with the frameworks on, be very happy to. But I'll give a couple of minutes just for some quiet reflection. And then if you'd like to come off mute and share or put it in the chat, then we can always, look and discuss together. And then I will show you a tool that can hopefully help kind of grow that further as well on the Lightful platform. So I'll give you a couple of minutes and then maybe pop in the chat when you're ready to discuss or share. Thank you, Taylor. I can see you've just posted in the chat. I was going to say we didn't give you very much time, so that was very impressive. Very speedy work. So you often write to individual donors. So what you've got as your kind of example is we're working with Miami's working class to ensure that everyone from our, I don't know that word, Ventanita ladies to our kids teachers can afford to stay here with sustainable jobs and housing for generations to come. Yeah, that's really cool. I really like that because you kind of bring that vision and you've kind of tied that in, I think, well, to the superpower you mentioned earlier of having the kind of the now and the future, which is really cool. And then, yeah, like you say, that's fine. I figured that out halfway through the word. Thanks, Taylor. That like, yeah, you can then add in some more, you could examples. So perhaps you could then go into one of your individual stories, particularly with this as an individual donor. So it might then lead on to say this particular person and talk through their kind of transformation succinctly with a quote from them, or maybe they say it in their own words, just in a couple of sentences. And then perhaps a little bit of impact of then the call to action-y type bit is saying that this kind of, I don't know, pick a level of financial support can help with X. Because I think that's the bit that can then, I know we've spoken before, being able to like really tangibly explain that because it's quite big, the kind of work that you're doing, which is really cool. But I know that's harder than some other organizations to be able to be like, $50 does this, but kind of saying what financial support goes towards, I think can be really cool. But yeah, I really like that. And that's a really great example. Thank you for sharing and doing that very quickly as well. I thought what we might do, I mean, feel free to post, to tweak, and anything else you want to add in. But I wanted to quickly show you the Keystone Story tool before we wrap up, because I think hopefully this will be helpful. Some of you might have used this already, because I know we've talked about how we launched it a couple of months ago. But it's basically designed to use AI to start with creating an effective, authentic story for your organization. So I think sometimes it can be really hard to have that initial succinct story that really sums up everything you do, that kind of elevator pitch that we mentioned, because you're probably in the depths of lots of the doing and the detail. So hopefully, I'm not saying it does it perfectly, but it gives you a starting point to actually then use it, edit it, and then you can adapt it for those different audiences. I'm going to give it a go actually really quickly with Castless Miami. Essentially on the Lightful platform, you can find it when you log in or up here in Keystone Story. You may have already been kind of guided through the steps when you logged in a few weeks ago. But what it will do is it will take from your website and create a story. So it's kind of depends on the content on your website. The only thing that you can, sorry, it's now writing as I'm trying to show you, but you can click, if you don't have a website, or if actually you don't think the website has the content that it will need, you can go through and follow about 3 questions where it asks you questions about your mission, what you do. You can write those answers in kind of whatever format you want, and then it will come together and pull out a story. So it's kind of not saying, right, you just copy and paste and use this story, but actually here's something to start with that you can then, I don't know, I always find it really helpful to have a starting place, then edit, kind of change things. So actually really interestingly, they've started with the hook about saying that half of households lack the savings to withstand even a brief disruption, and how that's a lived experience. Kind of the basis of where Catalyst Miami coming in as a solution for that, what the approach is, some examples of the programs, and then what the vision is. So you could even have that as a starting point, and then you can go in and change things. You can edit it directly in here if you'd like to, or you might say, actually, we'll work on it, get a core one ready, and then we can make different versions for those different audiences. The great thing as well that you can then do is use the other tools based on this story. So that's where if you do edit it, I would recommend updating it in here, because then you can look at your persona example that will give you, or even a campaign idea. So based on that, it'll come up with some suggestions. And actually this has come up with suggestions, I think, from the last organization that I did this for, but you can see it comes up with here's some information, here's the call to action, some strategies and suggestions for you, and you can go ahead and apply those if you'd like to. So definitely recommend having that as that kind of brainstorm stage, because it can be really helpful in just starting it off, even if you're then like, actually, I'm going to change this, I'm going to re-edit it. That's kind of what it's there for, just to give a bit of initial inspiration. So hopefully that helps, particularly as you go ahead to create your own case for supports and as you develop the things that you've already been kind of thinking about this morning. But give it a go, and we'd love to hear if anyone's used it already, or yeah, it would be great to hear how you're finding it as well. And just before we move on to our next steps, I can see Daniela, you have shared, which is brilliant. I'll have a read through. Thank you. So this is targeted at corporate partners. So you're saying Miami Homes for All has continuously evolved to meet residents' housing needs over the past 40 years. Our core mission is that everyone deserves a safe, affordable place to call home. That's not just a belief, but a right we aim to uphold through our programmes. Given that housing is the #1 social driver of health, we're finding every way to address systems gaps through unique partnerships that align with our holistic programming. No, I think that's really nice, especially as you're leading into why you're asking for partnerships, and particularly on that values point. And that's the kind of point of connecting with those corporate partners, is where do your values align? Where can you kind of connect with them on that level? So I think that's really great. And actually, yeah, thank you both of you for doing that super speedy activity as well. But hopefully that's just initially kind of got the cogs whirring and starting to put that into practice. But I think they're, yeah, really great. And hopefully then you can take those further and start applying them to those different audiences. So thank you both. And I know we're just coming up to the end of our time together, so I'll just hand over to Simran to just wrap us up for today.
Thank you. Yeah, completely agree with Jasmine. Such short time, but great results. Thanks to both of you for taking part in that. Yeah, let's look at the next steps. So first we're going to be looking at so Jasmine introduced the Keystone story. So one of the next steps is if you haven't used it before, if you would like to use it again, definitely have a try in that. And also try to use the framework that we've talked through today to plan your own case for support. So map out your mission, your vision, problem, solution, impact, and call to action. And also try to identify who your target audience is. So will it be funders, corporates, or members of the public? Maybe you could also try considering how each consumes their information. So which platforms will you share your case for support on, whether it's your website, or it could be a one-pager that is downloadable. And if you do need help identifying your target audience, we do have a Lightful Academy course to help. And that will be shared in the chat, but also will be found in Lightful Academy when you access the recording. And also do build your case for support with your audience in mind, and feel free to send us a copy so that we can review it together before you send it out. And if you need further support, do book a one-to-one and we can work through this together. And I can see that Jasmine has shared that in the chat, the links in the chat. And also want to remind you of our Lightful Academy Learning Challenge, which is running until July 31st. So if you do have some e-learning courses you'd like to try, this is your, you're always welcome to try it. But if you would like to earn some points, you get an exclusive badge and 50 learning points, also a feature on Lightful social media, and a $50 donation to your organization. And we're also going to launch a final poll. It's already up and running. So yeah, please take time to answer. How confident do you now feel about creating a case for support, and how useful did you find this session? And while you do so, I'm going to give it a quick minute to kind of open up the floor to any questions. If anyone has any questions they would like to ask us.
I think maybe it's not really a direct question, but more of like open to anybody's suggestions or ideas. I think um most of the time we're addressing stakeholders, and sometimes I think I don't know if I really struggle with the conversational piece when it comes to just meeting people in the community, because I tend to have like conversations naturally, even at like the dog park, and I'll meet random people who ask about my work and we'll somehow get into a conversation. But yeah, I don't know. I think I think like, what are suggestions on just kind of bringing some of the work that I guess sometimes gets a little bit technical or very focused on like the funders and that kind of conversation with stakeholders, and bringing it back down to just like a, a more casual level where some of the weight of the topic itself isn't isn't so present in the conversation. I guess like, yeah, it's kind of a broad question, but
Yeah, I think a good question. I feel like it's really great that you're naturally just championing it by talking about it to people day to day. So I think that's awesome. And yeah, it just shows that you kind of do, I suppose, like live and breathe the mission, which is, I think that really comes through as well, like that sincerity of how you're talking about it. So that's really great. And I think, yeah, maybe there is another layer here of kind of with the case for support, like you say, almost maybe even like a stripped back, taking some of the formality out in some ways of saying, like, we talk about elevator pitches, but sometimes even having that succinct couple of sentences that is just talking about what you do. But like you say, with the kind of weight of what that conversations can sometimes feel like, of having that hopeful point, which actually I think both of you really did when you're writing your cases. So I think it's weaving that in to how you might talk about it, like verbally as well as like on paper. And maybe there's something about that like inspirational hope capturing kind of short summary that removes some of the jargon, some of the like technical details, but actually links to the whys, especially with that funding point you mentioned. I think sometimes we can feel a bit like shy away from the fact that, you know, in order to do this, we need funding, and kind of spelling that out. Because sometimes we're really good at saying, oh, like here's some great results, here's some great impact, which sometimes leaves people thinking like, cool, like they've got that, they've got that in hand. And sometimes it's maybe that spelling out the ask and not being afraid to do so. Yeah, I appreciate, like you say, it's a broad thought, and kind of thinking about that tweaking, tailoring. And actually, if you know some of your stakeholders would prefer, you know, a shorter, more succinct version, or actually you will meet them in person and maybe you'll follow up with that more like detailed version, then that's something to definitely consider as well. That's a very broad answer. I hope that was somewhat helpful, Daniela, but thanks for your question.
yeah, no, I like just thinking of like the term stripped back is like, I think the right way to put it. And I think that's, yeah, I'm just gonna work on that a little more. We actually have like a storytelling team time on Friday where everybody's gonna work on like how they tie in their personal story into pitching what we do as an organization to people. So so I'm really excited. I think you guys gave me some more fuel for Friday to just bring to the conversation.
Yeah, really well timed. I love the idea as well of like people tying in their own stories, their own motivation. That's such cool. You'll have to let us know how that goes, because we might have to start recommending to other teams.
Yeah, definitely. Our consultant, our funding consultant, Tiffany is gonna lead it. So I'm happy to also bring back like some of these exercises and share them, because I think it's really useful, especially in Give Miami Day. It's something I was doing with part of the team last year ahead of Give Miami Day, but I'm glad that we're now everybody's going to do it. I think it's just like really brings some ease to talking about the work and to remembering why we're here.
yeah, and a chance to kind of practice that together. Like that sounds really cool. I love that. And also, yeah, I think like we just sort of touched on that point of being succinct. And I think where we know that there's kind of at times, well, most of the time at the moment, kind of information overload, the amount of information asks that people and organizations are getting is huge. So actually, if you can, I think it's sometimes the most challenging thing, because when you like actually write up what you do, there's so much, and it's then stripping it back to be like, actually, what's the headline, like someone was saying earlier, like what are those kind of like headline stats that stand alone, that then you can later have those deeper conversations. But actually, what is it like the most succinct version that you can share, which might be the biggest challenge, to have like the shortest one, but it could be great to experiment with. But yeah, thanks for sharing. Oh, I love that idea. I think I'm definitely going to be suggesting that to others. So that sounds awesome. And thank you both so much for getting stuck in. I know it's like lots to think about. We've shared loads of different examples and frameworks. We'll be sharing those afterwards, of course, as well. And do let us know if we can help further in any one-to-ones, but thank you for all your engagement. I know especially it's just a couple of you on the line, so do appreciate it, and I hope you have a great rest of your day, and yeah, look forward to catching up again soon.
Thank you, everyone. Enjoy the rest of your days.
Bye.
Bye.
Take care.
Bye.